Hi, I'm Erin. I am both the co-chair of the Mac Admins Foundation, and I also am currently working at an AI agentic ticketing and tooling company called Risotto. I have a few things to talk about. Typically, when we get on stage, especially since we are here by the lovely sponsorship and support from the MacEdX team, I usually do a little blurb about just like the Mac Admins Foundation, who we are and what we do, since that is a mission and essentially like just an affinity that we all share. So the Mac Admins Foundation, many of you I hope are in the Slack, which is essentially like the affinity communicative platform that we all use. It's also essentially like the largest repository of knowledge for Mac specific or IT adjacent materials probably in the world. I don't have any data behind that. I just have a lot of ego, but that's why I'm on the board. One of the things that we always say is if you're not in the community, please come find one of us. Our whole board, actually most of our board is here. We had a couple folks have to take off, but the majority of the board is actually here at the conference, meandering around. They have all my stickers, so if that's all the motivation, come find us and we'll give you some sweet swag. Okay, let's get into it. Quick poll. How many of you are getting having the conversation internally about utilizing AI or being told that you need to increase your AI usage? Holy crap, that's a pretty big increase from even last month. Okay, cool. We're gonna keep it cash on this. I don't wanna come at you with any specific expectation around this, but we'll give you a little bit of a grounding and just like what's going on, what I'm seeing as somebody who communicates with a lot of different teams, and beat the absolute living shit out of this topic, because I know we're all probably tired of hearing about it too. Are we tired of hearing about it? Yeah, me too, honestly, and I deal with it every day. So, okay, a little backstory on me as a human being. It's been a couple years since I've been here, even more since I've been off stage. I've been in the IT industry for 20 years. I started out as an admin, just like many other folks in this room. I moved into leadership at a lot of high-growth startups. I am based in the Bay Area. I am steeped in the tech sauce, whether I wanted to be or not. Definitely in the echo chamber too. So a lot of the stuff that I get introduced to has like a high density to it. So I do always prereq this with take it with a grain of salt, right? Apply this at the rate that you feel is appropriate to your own work, life, or whatever we're gonna be discussing. Cool? Sick. Cool. All right, my AI credentials. Somebody actually pointed this out to me. I've now done this twice. When I deviated out of IT for the first time, I ended up going and working for an ML back to ticketing company for a hot minute. So I've now seen the evolution, if we're doing the coffee waves thing. I've seen the evolution from essentially second wave to third wave systems, and the changes and the evolution that's happening. The big core thing that I am hearing now, and the big thing that I took away from this is one, the rate of change and the rapidity of the pace around this now is pretty exponential from where it used to be. But the other part is actually the training, right? The way that you actually build, manage, and own your data set has fundamentally changed. When I was working for the previous company, when it was simply ML backed, we owned all of our own models. We were also bespoke, engineering what those models looked like, because the just competency around those models did not exist in any other way. So you're both building the ship while you're trying to steer it, but then in addition to that, you're also trying to teach the ship how to turn, which is kind of crazy, because in a lot of cases you do end up going in circles. Still a thing that happens, but it's very much in a different and a much more self-corrective way now. So that just kind of methodology has changed pretty fundamentally. So within the last week, especially in the States, I do not know how much this has trickled over. So apologies in advance, right? A lot of the conversations around this that I have are definitely I would say United States focused or tech industry focused, Silicon Valley focused. So hopefully this is a perspective trade. But there's been a lot of conversation about this in the last week specifically. I do have a whole citation list of stuff that I reference, materials you can go grab at the end. So I ended up like blowing up my presentation and starting from scratch, just because the topics and I think like the relevancy is starting to really come to the forefront. So when you're thinking about AI in your workplace, I think one of the things that I am seeing most frequently now is people are just injecting the tools in. There's such a readable access to this. There's a lot of stuff that is like low or feels no cost. I know that's not necessarily true. And what happens is like in the state of play and the opportunity to go and like play around with things, people just add the tool in. We recognize this as something, probably a pattern that we're all familiar with, but what that ultimately does is it doesn't really give you the holistic look of like what is going to happen when you're injecting an AI tool or tooling into any workflow. Because what you are essentially doing is you are delegating something away, and in the process of delegation, then you have to rethink, what am I actually responsible for? So if you're not doing that by way of these kind of 3 areas, there's a likelihood that things are going to feel really fractured. It's going to feel a lot more chaotic than it needs to be when you're thinking about the adoption, about the training, whether that's person-to-person training or actual model training, the usability around that, the security, the access, et cetera, right? It's the Wild Wild West methodology. So if I translate these into questions, the things that I usually say is like, what do you know about the AI tooling that you have or that you're being asked to have or use? And then what do you know about your environment, i.e. The people who are using it, the company that you work for, the philosophy around change, right? Or just like rate of change, comfortability with technology, all of those are relevant questions to ask. The second is, what is the application of this tool? That is absolutely like critical, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But like, what is the actual application going to be? And then how am I like looking at this as something that's going to be side by side rather than something that I'm just utilizing? And then I know that this is like big and heady, and it very much depends on like who your quote change makers are, right? Who are your champions, who are whatever your language around that, who are the people who are spearheading the thing that you're doing. But essentially, like, how do you get people on board with this? I will say this is really hard to do. This is not a job or a task of one person. It is nay impossible if it is one person, unless that's their whole job. Like if they've been brought in to do that, that's essentially like what this implies. If you don't have that, you don't have a task force, you don't have like essentially like a cross-functional group of people who are thinking about this, and whether pretending or actually educated on it, both are fine, then, right, like you're gonna see a much more fractured implementation. Are people experiencing that? I am curious. I've heard the gamut now. Do we have any folks who have like an AI task force internal to their company? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Okay, I'm seeing a few. Cool, very relevant. This is something where if you want to do that whole managing up thing, which I'm not suggesting that you have to do, but you have an opportunity to say like, hey, have we thought about like bringing a bunch of people together and talking about AI? I'm sure they'll be thrilled. So, one of the things that's changed, especially in the last, I would say, 3 weeks, that we've been really steeped in at my day job, is talking about where the change is being most aptly noticed and noticed early. Engineering is definitely one of those areas. I know that we might not all be within that org, or maybe in some cases we report up that chain. But what I'm essentially saying is there's this like shift in the industry that is happening around the way that our roles are being written and defined, like job descriptions, expectations, and they're starting to like shift back to the engineering model a little bit. It also means that the type of work you're doing in your role is shifting. And this is probably like the hardest thing on an individual level for us to start to detangle. Also really difficult to quantify when you are a manager and you are trying to essentially like change a rate of expectations or do review season or set up goals and strategies and all the things that essentially you have to talk about to give people executable work. This is essentially like the mind shift that you have to go through. The hard part is how rapidly this is happening, which is why this feels important now. So you all are ahead of the game now. Right, like very tactile things are happening here. That's exactly what this is, right? This is all on the left-hand side. These are all things that we're really familiar with. This is what we expect to do. There's a formula to this that you can probably say, I identify with this because I do a version of it in my role right now. But this is what it's becoming. And whether or not you are also participating specifically in these tasks, that same like thought process applies. There's probably a form of this that you're noticing and maybe haven't really been able to put a finger on why your job feels different or why your role and like the work you're doing on a day-to-day feels slightly different if you are in the process of adopting an AI tool or adopted AI tooling that is integral to your workflows. So it's a lot of oversight. We're going from like doing the things to watching the things, do the things, and then checking the things. That's really what it is. So it sounds really unfun. I'm not gonna pretend like when I wrote this down and looked at that, I was like, cool, so I pass butter now. That's sick, I love this. But there are some benefits to this. I'm just gonna let this sink in, right? This is where I like do the little gear shift just to see like, you know, if we've all really like glazed over from this. But this is still a core and critical piece because this sets up the like, how do you do the things that I just showed you on screen effectively? And also, just an FYI, if you want to catch me for a beer after the conference or, I don't know, like during lunch at the gin stand, I have a lot of personal feelings about AI and like how it exists in our universe at a macro level. My goal is to make sure that like this is a core feature also doesn't necessarily like detract you from using it because it is a requirement of your work, especially for the amount of hands that went up, but also that you know how to essentially be smarter than the majority of the room without having to like drink the Kool-Aid. So, keeping it real. So, this is the list of stuff. Obviously, because I blew up the talk, this isn't necessarily like directly about like how do you shift your job descriptions. I'd be happy to chat with anybody who is interested in that because I know that the question is coming up a lot, especially on like the West Coast of like, holy crap, I see so many job descriptions that now include a requirement for, quote, AI testing or competency in AI. It's like, how the hell do you actually quantify that? Like, you don't even know what that means. So this should give you some framework to apply that when you're thinking about your job description, because my argument and what I posit is that you're not actually like looking at AI competency, you're looking for all the intrinsic skills that we've typically called something else historically, and that there needs to be a movement back to that as the things that you are investing in, especially in your people. So, when you're talking about what that looks like in a more tactile way, when you're like writing a 30, 60, 90, or you're writing a job description, or you're thinking about what their role is actually going to be, this is the stuff, yet again, that we are very used to doing. The thing about that is computers are also really good at that. We've written tools that do this for us. They're tools that are quite right, like all of us utilize, right? This is your MDM, this is your security, this is your DLP monitoring. All of those things are written in code, which means an AI or an AI agent is gonna be really good at understanding how that operates, because that's whole thing too. What it's not necessarily as good at are the things that you have in your lovely little brains. So those are all your, what I very often call your fifis, your feelings, your thoughts, your feelings, your ability to critically think, your ability to be a skeptic, your ability to communicate effectively. Those are all things that like, you could say like, well, I can put a letter into, you know, like Claude or into OpenAI, and I can get something back that feels a lot more like clear than what I did, but that's just editing. That is not the thought process of writing the actual content and what the content means and why it means something. That's the stuff that you do. You all are wonderful little snowflakes, and that's very important. This is also where your skepticism should live as well. So those are the things that you also should be quantifying when you're looking for quality candidates, for where people are successfully applying the skills that they have to AI, how to measure whether or not somebody is overutilizing AI and deferring too much of their responsibility or their expertise to a tool. Like that is essentially the branching. So, fair warning. Speaking of critical thinking, we'll talk a little bit about how to apply that into the models themselves. Most of this can be applied, I would say, like at a base level. If you're not necessarily doing like the full integration or you're not doing MCP work yet, a lot of this can essentially be applied to literally just having a wee chat with like Claude, basically, right? So if you're just doing prompting, there's a conversation about prompting and like the evolution around that as well, which is the second point. So, right, like your critical thinking skills are the hand-holding that you need to be doing. It doesn't know what it doesn't know, right? You cannot assume that this thing has access to everything, and the context that I talked about at the top does matter. There's an entire conversation happening around like how do you conversate with AI, and like what is the best way to get or like squeeze the right information out of AI if you're essentially shifting how you operate, right? If you're not sitting there and thinking, okay, I need to build a policy around machine management that is going to apply to users who exist in a contractor state, and these are the things that need to happen around that. If you say that, you already have all that like kind of externalized context of, I know the company, I know where those contractors like work, what their geography is, I know what the parameters are for like what needs to be included or excluded. The model doesn't know that. It has no idea what that is. So describing that and then applying that to the way that you conversate with the model makes a huge difference in the output that you get. So that's where we get into we're no longer prompt engineering, right? We're not just like feeding a bunch of garbage in and then expecting like magic out. What you're looking for is you're actually looking for contextual learning. And the context is, again, what you provide. I will truly like beat that to a pulp during this conversation. You have context. What this means is your conversational components are going to need to get stronger. So, source material. I spent a lot of time when I was building this out, like in the back of my brain going, AI could probably go find all this for me. And I could utilize that as a resource to aid me in the development of this presentation. I opted not to. I went out and I found my own research material. I actually went out and tried to find the things that I felt, knowing my understanding of what reputable source material would be, to utilize it in this presentation. Did I then feed some of my thoughts about what was happening into a model to talk about it with it, just to make sure that I wasn't losing my gourd? Absolutely. But it all comes back to the fact that I already had a really good foundation for what I was going to do. I can speak confidently to this subject independently of utilizing the model, but I can also enhance what I am doing and speed it up as somebody who has a very intensive day job and a life by utilizing something that can just act and operate faster than I can. So, cool, I'm doing okay on time. So, what should you be learning and doing here? There is no such a thing as grunt work. This is kind of like where my presentation or where the topic around this started for me. The question is like, what do we do about the skills gap that's arising? That's something that I care a lot about as somebody who's been a leader and a mentor for quite a while, who really at the point of retirement wants somebody else to take on what I've done with more confidence that I ever had at a faster rate as well. Which means that it's a lot harder to teach people how to do an IT job, especially when we know that the rate of automation is going to go up around this tool set, and make sure that they're doing it kind of with the same things that we had to muddle through on our own, right? Like we probably, I think just the makeup of this room, I'm assuming that a lot of us did a lot of manual work and a lot of really basic work and a lot of really repetitive work. And once that was beat into our skulls, then we got to do the more interesting things. Then we got to do the harder things. Then we got to do the conceptualized things. There's not a lot of that anymore. You don't have to do this. I can speak to this very intently. There is no tier 1 in operations when you add in AI ticketing, and I don't say this as, I promise, not an advertisement. It just is a reframe that I have when I get on a call with anyone who is thinking about implementing the tooling that I work for. You don't have to think about providing access grants. This tool can do it end-to-end for you. Okay, well, what does that mean for teaching somebody Okta, access management practices, how to ask questions to make sure that people are getting access to the right tooling? All of that stuff is no longer a skill that you teach by repetitive action anymore. So little terrifying when it comes to like leading and managing people, honestly, because you're like, cool, now I really have to think of like really interesting things for you to do, and I have to get you up to a higher level of skill faster, somehow also still telling you to use these tools who are supposed to do it for you. So again, Pulp said this already, if a computer made it, it can automate it, right? Which means that the people that are working for you are likely utilizing the thing that allegedly understands that code base to figure out what their workflows look like on their own. That puts you in a tough position too, because like then there's a question about validation that you have to think about. And then learn the thing that is not automatable. There's a really great, this is also included, I highly reference this for this talk. The New York Times, The Daily, did a really wonderful conversation with one of their reporters who went out and advertised and talked to 75 different engineers, and essentially came away with the fact that like conversation is actually becoming the more critical point of any kind of like engineering role at this point. There's a sick quote in here that I absolutely referenced coming up. But that is really the stuff that matters, which also makes it feel like we're going a little bit back to like thought leadership BS. But right, it's like relationships are the things that are gonna build like your ability to function around tooling, where tooling is not necessarily like your core responsibility anymore. Sorry. So, I think I talked a lot about this already, and I was trying to use some just like common language. I don't really agree with the topic of like calling some of these bedside skills. That's why I keep on referring to them as intrinsic skills. They're human skills, right? But for the sake of what we know and how they get referenced, this is the stuff that you need to be thinking about. I would hope that giving you this level of information is something that you can take back and you can actually apply it to the things that you need when you're talking about pipeline and hiring. But in addition, that you can look at this and you can say, I understand what I need to do and how I need to be engaging with my coworkers, whether that's up, down the chain, whether that's side to side, right? Like this is the stuff that you could actually like start to articulate to folks. This might also help reframe some of the thinking that you're doing around your process management, especially when you're like trying to figure out how to utilize or inject an AI tool into something. So the things that I like to call out about this is, right, again, critical thinking, then also be able to talk about it, like really intensely. Know your audience is super important too here. And then in our basic language, whiteboard the shit out of it. You should be going back to drawing, iterating, understand what your end-to-end intent of your tooling is before you actually do something with it or before you unleash AI into going and doing it for you. And that's because you're the only person, or your team is the only person who knows what your expected outcome is. The AI does not know that. You have to tell it that. So this is also another way that you can do some of that teaching about the tooling. If you get your early stage and early career individuals involved in this process, whether or not they understand it, it means that you have to, one, be able to explain the core concepts of that tooling, and then two, you can also walk them through what your thought process is, knowing that you have more direct manual experience with that tooling. So there is your technical legacy. And then understand your tools. This is kind of like the fun part for us, and I think this is actually something that is like maybe like a little bit of like the silver lining around the gray cloud that is AI, is you get to be a lot more imaginative now, which means you can also, because you can iterate faster, you can provide more opportunities for conceptualization, i.e. you can build multiple prototypes. You will get a result in a much faster way, and because of that rapidity, you can try things. You can, like when you do the what if we, and you're not sure if that's fully baked, you can go have it just like build that out for you, get that wireframe, see what it looks like, see if it actually works, and can it if it doesn't, which is pretty cool. So that's all there. I saw some folks taking pictures. I will share this as well. You may have this. I don't want this knowledge for forever, only in my brain. It's yours now, have fun. Cool, applying that. I will fully admit I had some help with this, partially because in my extended network, obviously, I know a lot of people who are working for other AI and AI adjacent companies. So this is like a little bit of learning over time. This was new to me. I didn't set out to go work in this specific like subset of the industry. So I am also learning this with you. But I have seen a dramatic result in like utilizing this framework in a very different way. I do also fall into the camp where I still say thank you to the AI, just in case. Just in case. So, TLDR on this, be clear. Tell it what to do and what not to do. I used Asimov. I think that's a really aggro version of this, but right, like it's something that we kind of concretely know. You can do this up until the point where that is no longer ethically okay. So you can tell it, do this, don't do this, and don't do that. You can also tell it tonally how you want that to exist or how you want that to work, like be nice. You know, like we operate pretty chill here. Chill means X, Y, Z. That means that I want you to follow that language when you're like writing any communications or something like that. Define the working relationship, right? That's essentially what I just said. This is the context that you already have, that you already know. This might also exist for you if you're in an evolved company. That's usually what you're seeing injected into an MCP, which I think is like coming at a really, really fast rate. So people are like, MCP, and are not totally ready to understand what that means, and that's okay. It's a whole other topic. This is know your ins and outs, right? What problem are you trying to solve? It's not really that much different from that statement, but can you describe what that looks like at the end of this if you were pitching it? And then this was new to me. This let it defend its choices. I struggle with that personally because I'm like, no, I know what you should be doing. Like you shush, you not real, you shush. But what you can essentially say is like, what is your thought process here? Which is something that you would ask a coworker. And so I'm still personally struggling with the idea that I should like anthropomorphize this thing. But if you give it the opportunity to essentially like tell you why it thought that way, that gives you the way in which you can provide the expected feedback back. Turns out that's a really great skill for you to be able to talk to your peers. So, you know, I don't know, try it out on AI so you can get good at it and talk to your, you know, other humans and be kinder to them. So, this is the quote I was talking about. This really stuck with me. This is the thing that like seems to be happening. And so, I don't know, another silver lining, maybe this applies in our social lives a little bit more somehow. Oopsie doodles. Turns out the machines are teaching us something. So I highly recommend that podcast. It was the thing that got me to throw out the entire original presentation that I had. Cool. I mentioned this at the top. This is the skills gap question. The Stanford, Eric Brindofferson has done a ton of research on this. He also has some amazing talks online. A lot of this is also emerging research, but I highly recommend taking a look at that because he does an overlap of essentially like economics as it pertains to jobs in the job market. Most of it obviously is at like a Fed, like US Fed scale, but he does a lot of global macroeconomics and then what that looks like for like the quote soft skills as well. So there's like a really like big sociological component to his work as well. So what we're seeing, this little blurb down at the bottom could be its own talk as well, but right, like you're seeing a bloat in the middle because like there is no way in that is really easy right now for somebody who's coming into this job market, which is why talking to those people and working more directly with them is so important right now. And then at the diamond part, right, like you are seeing like a ton of people who are getting really good at doing like really, really solid work. Whether or not we agree with the quality of it is a whole other conversation. And then same thing at the top, right, which we've known that part, that's just the triangle that's existed for a while, but right, there is kind of like this flip-flop of happening around expertise and therefore also like who is actually building direction. So weird time, super weird time to be in the job market, but if you can speak to this, I would say like literally steal my presentation, right, like Black Keys style, steal this record, like take this to your job interview. Talk about this, plagiarize. I think I've already said this. I'm going to speed through a couple of these so we can chit chat for a bit. But this is essentially like how you can apply that in a human context. It's same. Cool. That's it. That was denser than I thought it was. Any questions, comments, concerns? I'm not a great debater. I'll just give you that.
Where do we get a copy of the slides?
I will upload them. I finished them yesterday. So I will upload them into the Whova app. I am also obviously in the Mac admins Slack, so if you also want to find me there for a different like type of copy, if you need a different like, if you need a PDF versus something else, I can DM it to you as well. My tagline is merchant.
All the sessions are also recorded and
Yeah.
will be posted on YouTube.
I'm trying to work out how to phrase this because it's a slightly sensitive topic in some respects, but I'm thinking about what you were saying about, do what you do with colleagues with an AI, and I'm really interested by the gap that we sometimes have in technology with people skills, but also I'm thinking about some colleagues I know who either they're dyslexic or they didn't have English as a first language as a child, so they sometimes transpose words, and I'm wondering how tolerant AI will be of those people and whether they're at a distinct disadvantage because of that going forward.
It's a really interesting question. I don't know if I have I literally don't have the educational degree to answer that fully.
Understood. It was more of a thinking point than anything else. But
totally, but I can talk about that in the context of what I see, especially when my function is now, funny story, I've hopped the fence. I'm actually CX now. So I'm essentially like a support system for all of you and all the folks who essentially like purchase product from my company, which is fun because I get to talk to a whole bunch of different people now. What I can say around that is it's pretty agnostic when it comes to language and languages. I haven't seen any real difference in behavioral shifts especially when you're talking about that, like around a core product, right? Like it has a job. The company that I work for is Risotto, AI ticketing, right? There's a function there. So it's pretty respectful across multiple languages, as long as there is, I would say, good written communication in the language.
And that's the bit
That's
I'm
the hard
concerned
part.
about.
Yeah, I agree.
It's that structuring of sentences and so on.
Structuring is, I think, a little easier because everybody talks in a really specific way. I tend to be a pretty verbose person, which is very, I think, like oppositional to the expectation that we have in the IT profession, especially when we're saying things like you need to be able to give like a 30-second elevator pitch. Well, frankly, fuck. Like that's my nightmare, because if I haven't formulated it like 50 times over, I don't know what I'm gonna say. But it is pretty respectful of that, and if you can articulate what you want, then it doesn't matter. Hi, I usually speak at a pretty high, I speak relatively quickly. I have the tendency to use a lot of additional flowery language. What I really need is you to do this opposite of the way that I speak. And then if you give it that like context, then it starts to understand like maybe like why or like how it should essentially represent you in that conversation. Also a little terrifying.
That context is interesting,
Yeah.
but I also, I think I sometimes wonder whether, I'm thinking of kind of a set of specific people, and actually I wonder whether some of them even know that they communicate in a certain way, and therefore they need to give that context. But it's, it's thinking. It's pure thinking point.
Totally.
So,
I mean,
I'm going to play with it.
But the thing that I can say about that is that, right, like curiosity has been a thing that's come up quite a lot around this. And I think if you approach that with curiosity, I'll just give you, right, like the US, sorry for mild politicking, the US public school system kind of blows. So when I think about that, and then I think about some of the like unintentional positive side effects that tooling like this can have, when I look at the comparison of education and education access, and then something that is free, which is, for better or for worse, just a prompt that lives, like out on the web that is AI embedded, you're giving people who potentially do not have the skill set, who have not been educated, who have not had the opportunity to be educated in an appropriate way, and this is now available to them. whether or not they know it, if they're not getting the answers, I'm not talking about hallucinations, right? And AI psychosis, that's an entire other like area. But if you're not getting the answers that you need out of a tool, and you're not just like looking for the answers that you want, right? But you're just not getting the information back that you are hoping to, not giving you the right research, right? Like not giving you the right, like, I don't know, message that you're trying to send, whatever it is. By nature, that requires curiosity, which is essentially just reframing what you're writing. And if you didn't have good English skills as like a baseline language that is shared globally for, you know, for better or for worse, if you didn't have good grammar, like you didn't do well in English growing up, I did garbage at math, like, right? Like if you don't have that skill set built in, you're still gonna retry and retry and retry until you get frustrated, and then you're gonna go ask somebody else. And then you're gonna retry and retry and retry. So as long as that is something that you are capable of, the models are relatively forgiving.
Thank you.
It doesn't get tired. That's the other thing, right? It doesn't get tired. So you can retry and retry and retry. Cool. Awesome, thank you.